Hello everyone, welcome back again to the NPTEL online certification course on research methodology for planning and architectural studies. So far we have discussed about bibliometric analysis in our last lecture. That is one of the important type of literature review. So today at lecture number 13 we are going to discuss on another type, that is called systematic literature review. So in this presentation what we are going to learn, that what exactly systematic literature review means, and then we also try to see the difference between the systematic literature review and traditional way of reviewing the literature. Then we talk about prisma, that is one of the common technique in systematic literature review, or also it is shortly referred as SLR. So in this case we will discuss the prisma approach, and then from there we also try to understand the data extraction part of it, and then synthesis and reporting of this particular information. So what is systematic literature review? Systematic review provides a systematic, transparent means of gathering, synthesizing and appraising the findings of study which is already being done and which is on a particular topic. So definitely again it is something like you have to filter it out to the number of literature where you just do this kind of review. The aim of systematic literature review is to minimize the bias associated with single studies and non-systematic or traditional review. So whenever you have only one study to refer, so probably that may have a biasness, or maybe if you do not follow the systematic one, you go for a non-systematic traditional way of reviewing, moving from one paper to other paper. So probably there will be some sort of biasness. So in this case if you go with the systematic approach, so that will minimize the bias. Take another look into it. The systematic review is a research article that identifies relevant studies, appraises their quality and summarizes their result using scientific methodology. So here it is not just merely you are talking about the bibliometric information about the title or the keyword. Here we are also analyzing the paper in a scientific way. So in systematic literature review, what exactly we do? Systematic review uses a standardized, structured and protocol driven methodology to answer pre-decided research questions, that the initial point of searching the literature, through a rigorous, systematic, comprehensive and exhaustive search, screening and analysis. So this screening is very important, that what are the papers are relevant, you just filter it out to screen out the best possible research, okay, existing literature that may help you doing your research. Systematic review must be objective, okay, and in this case definitely it should be transparent to remove the biasness, so that you only take up the information which can fit your argument. You also need to review those probably which in the similar topic there are some sort of argument which is not in favor of that particular approach, or maybe that particular findings, and then in this case definitely it should be replicable. It involves analysis of research content of literature as opposed to bibliometric analysis. So in bibliometric analysis we do not look at the content, but here it is important because this is something that you require to understand. Now let us understand head to head comparison between traditional review and systematic literature review. If you say the aim, so in that case the aim of traditional review to gain a broad understanding and description of that particular field. So it is a broad understanding of the topic, okay, and then we just search, we get a paper and then start reading it to understand, okay, so this is on this broad topic, and then we find that okay, there is another paper, it is mentioned in that particular paper that I am reading through. Then we again take that paper to read. So, on that way we can move. But in this particular case of systematic literature review, the aim is it is something very tightly specified aim and objectives with specific review questions. So, here in this case we have something to ask. Okay. So, we have certain kind of questions, research questions in our mind, and specifically we try to search that particular questions and the answer in this particular way of doing the literature review. So, that means it is not a broad topic that I am driving into this. So, I have a specific questions, and along that side we just go for searching the literature and do the analysis, do the synthesis of the content of that literature. If you see the scope, so in systematic literature review, as because we are fine tuning based on a specific question, it is having very narrow and pinpointed focus, where for the traditional review it is very much open ended, like reading a book kind of thing. Then in this case, like if you consider the planning the review, so in this case there is no defined path, allows for creativity and exploration. So, in this case we are free to do, okay, in that particular review, that I read this particular portion and I get a reference, I can go for other journal, etc. Where in the systematic literature review it is much more transparent process and document and audit the trail. So, it is something that whatever is coming with your research questions, we need to look into it. Searching for the study. So, traditional review we searching is probing in nature and moving from one study to another, following up the leads. So, I get a clue from a reference cited in a paper and then I just search the other one. So, like that we are going for one after another as and when required and prompted through the reading. Whereas, in this particular case it is much more rigorous in systematic literature review and comprehensive and search for all studies. It is not like I just move from one to another taking the lead. We go for searching all research in this, but definitely that should be pinpointed. There should not be any extra information out of the research questions for which we are doing this. Selection of studies for the traditional review is much more purposive selection made by the reviewer, that I can pick up based on my convenience. In case of SLR, we have predetermined inclusion and exclusion criteria that you fit into the search. Now, quality assessment, it is based on the reviewer's opinion. So, who are going to review, I just go for making the opinion on it, but in systematic literature review there is a checklist to assess the methodological quality of the study. So, in this case we just make a particular table. So, where you can say that okay, the objective of the research, the methods that is used, the methodology that they use, the findings that they have finally come up with. So, we make a tabulation form and do some sort of comparison on that. Now, the other type, the analysis and synthesis, much more like for the traditional review, it is in descriptive nature. So, it is just giving that kind of creeps of the findings of the reading. But in systematic literature review, as I already mentioned, so it will give you a tabular format and short summary of the answers. So, in this case, that each of the paper, what are the factors that has been considered and what are the methodology that has been considered. So, those kind of things are tabulated in a nice format. Methodological report. So, in this case traditional review, there is no such kind of necessarily it should be given, but for systematic literature review that must be presented for transparency and replicability. So, this particular table, like for a researcher, is a reference document. Like if you have this kind of table, say for example you prepare a table. So, here you just write the paper code, or maybe you can say the author in this, author 1, author 2, and then probably you can say the location of the paper, then the objective of this paper, then the method they have used in this paper, and then finally the conclusion. So, depending on uh, what you want to extract from this SLR. So you can make that table and then you can report it for all of the studies that is being considered in SLR. So that is going to give you a overall idea, the overall approach by which you can identify that okay, what should be the research questions for your own research, what are the methods that are being frequently used in this kind of research, so that you can make a call on the method that you can also explore, or maybe in conclusion what are the directions that people are talking about, what are the future work that they have referred. So all these things will help you to make your research objective very strong, clear, and then doable. Now selection of study, so this is something like the Prisma approach that you can also try in your case. So Prisma stand for preferred reporting items for systematic reviews and meta analysis. So it is an established methodological protocol for identification of literature, screening of literature, and selection of literature for systematic literature review and meta analysis. So through Prisma we can identify the final list of literature and document which will consider for further review from say n number of papers that are available. So through Prisma we can come down to say a small n. So from n to small n, that small number, or it may not be small, like it's not good to say that small or large. So it is the very pertinent literature which actually satisfy all these inclusion and exclusion criteria that you put it into your logical search, and then you can end up with that particular list and you go for the review. The Prisma statement published in 2019 was designed to help systematic reviewers transparently report why the review was done, what the authors did, and what they found. It is updated version published in 2020. So in this case, let us understand this, because this is something very interesting and can help you out to do this Prisma thing for your own literature search. So first stage of this is the identification of studies via database or registers. So in this case you have certain such database and register, and first stage of this is the identification. So in the identification, so you have record identified from database or the registers. So the past records and all list of already published PhD work or something. So you can identify and n equal to that number, right. So in this case, next stage will be the screening, but before that you remove some of the things before screening, that duplicate record, that is number something that you will get. Say for example, you have search the topic in multiple database. Suppose you use Scopus, you use the Web of Science. So you end up with say separate number, but many of the papers they are being indexed in both of the database. Suppose it is in Scopus, it is also in Web of Science. So then that is a duplicate entry. So you have to remove it, otherwise you see the number is erroneous. So if say out of 100 papers and another 100 in Web of Science, say you find that 30 papers are common. So then you remove the duplicate. So essentially it is not 200 papers. So it is 170 papers, because 30 are common. Then records marked as ineligible by automation tool. So some of the things probably you only want to do the search on something on the English language literature. Okay, so the literature which is written in English. So for that you remove the other thing. Records can remove for other reasons, maybe in that case something is very outdated, or maybe the paper is not really from good journal or something, so you can remove it. So you are coming up with little lower number. Now record screen is the number which is like the total record from the database minus the initial removal of the duplication and other thing. So one, it is screen, then you then go for the records excluded out of it. Then in this case you can go for reports for retrieval. So, report for retrieval is something, even if, like say for example, you come up with certain papers which is for last 5 years. So, the other papers you remove automatically, but you understand that okay, that even if you are interested in last 5 years publication, but few papers are very important even if it is published say 10-20 years ago. So, that should have some sort of value. So, you go for some sort of retrieval. So, that means automatically if you use the algorithm that the paper is out of that particular time period of your search, so it will be removed, but you can retrieve those kind of papers again. In this case, the report not retrieved is something also you can mention. Then after that you go for report assessed for eligibility, and in this case that particular inclusion you have to give the reason for some kind of exclusion in this stage. So, the reason for exclusion may be that the abstract is not appropriate, or maybe this particular title is misleading even if the words are matching, but it is not particular to the topic. So, there will be some reason of exclusion that you need to do to screen it out. Then inclusion. So, studies included in the review plus reports included in the study. So, both cases you just add the information, and finally, you go for identification of your studies by other methods. So, additionally whenever you go for a database you have certain numbers, and then in this case you find the records identified from the website, different organization, then different kind of other citation search, and then again you can think of the reports that you need to go for the retrieval, and then you just include them. So, this kind of search few are also added into this particular study. So, one is from the review that you are including, and other you can go for this kind of other method. So, altogether you will have the inclusion of say n number of papers. So, we started with a broad number, like maybe it started with say 100 papers that are like similar to your topic, but after that probably you find that okay, that there is some duplication. So, you minus 20 papers, so it is now being 80. Then you think that 80 is all right in that time frame, but then you need to add another 5 papers which are having high relevance. So, you add this at the stage of the report sort for retrieval, and then finally, you have 85 such document. Then you add the exclusion criteria. So, in this exclusion criteria you just cite the reason that okay, looking at the abstract, so this paper is not in scope. Looking at the methods, that okay, it is based on the quantitative approach, but you are looking for some qualitative approach paper. So, some paper again the reason can be different from different researcher, then you have certain kind of paper, and this all thing has been done through a database and register search. But along with that there might be some other search from the website, there may be some government document, and you do the same process, and again also you have to do this kind of stage, like you have performed that stage of exclusion of the report because of some non suitability in terms of like overall like methodology or methods, or it may be language. The reason can be specified by the researcher, and then you include both of them into this particular overall inclusion, and now you go for detailed review of it. So, this is the initial stage where you just identify the suitable literature for your SLR. Now, next stage is the data extraction. So, in this case, after selecting the study that you need to review further in the SLR, you extract the relevant data and then summarize it. Generally, a tabulation of this particular study that we take, which will talk about the methodology. We also talk about the source of data, that whether it is done primary survey and all. Sometimes also it talks about the sample size for the experiment or the survey. So that can also give certain idea. So for this kind of study, that minimum sample is they have considered like this. Or maybe it is something you want to do for the expert opinion survey, you want to apply HP or TOPSIS or some other method. For that, what are the others studies that they mentioned about their total number of experts. So it talks about the data collection, the method of analysis, other assumptions, and also the results. So this is something, the results that also you can compare in this case in a qualitative manner in this systematic literature review, but you can also use this thing in a quantitative way in the meta analysis. That will be our next lecture, where we will discuss that how we can take help of meta analysis to perform such kind of literature review in a quantitative manner. Any other information to be extracted from the selected study to specifically answer the research questions of the systematic review also included in the tabulation. So as I already mentioned that okay, it depends on the reviewer or the researcher, that okay, out of this many literature which is shortlisted through Prisma in a systematic manner, then after that when you tabulate that okay, this is the uh, methods they have used, this is the data collection procedure they have adopted, or this is the findings. Then if you want to add something more, suppose you want to add the location of the study, or maybe you can say the duration of the particular how much time that is used in that particular conducting survey. So you can always add some more column to it to get the answer to your research questions. After that we have this stage called synthesis and reporting of the document. So in this case the tabulated data is used to observe the trend, similarities and difference in the existing literature. So that is something I was trying to convey, that looking at that we try to make some sort of comparison. Suppose you reviewed say 50 papers on a topic called similarly the effects of say COVID-19 on trip generation or making a foreign trip decision. So in this case there are different way of doing the literature. I just can take example of the data collection procedure. So maybe in this particular case that somebody used the method called like online survey, they just simply ask and they circulate the online survey to the respondent, and they were asked different questions, that okay, the reasons or some other follow up questions to understand this particular aspect. Or else maybe some other researcher they also considered it, but in that case it is not like a participatory survey where they asked the respondent. Here maybe somebody also else looked at the other information like the tickets sold or the flight booking thing, or maybe it is some kind of survey with the operators, okay, or maybe it's some kind of secondary information which is being published, that okay, there is a reduction in the foreign trip during this phase. So in this case in two approaches, like one is that asking from the respondent, the other one is from the secondary data to assess the impact of this kind of COVID-19. So in that case definitely the approach is different, but maybe you can see the findings there is similarity. And then when you see that okay, repeatedly for last 5 years this kind of study has been done, and this is the method like some fuzzy Delphi technique say for example being used to understand those kind of uh, you know um, parameters from expert, and maybe in such kind of expert based opinion that the Delphi technique being used, and then in last 5 years it is not the Delphi technique to overcome those kind of ambiguity and then confidence level of the expert. So the fuzziness added to it, so there should be some kind of fuzzification of those scripts data and all. So with that approach maybe this is the trend in that method. So it can be a trend in the method, so probably that is something which is having advantage over the previously used method. Or say for example earlier like people used the analytical hierarchy process, or the HP. But in current times probably you will find the papers on the fuzzy HP. So there is some add-on why to add fuzzy HP compared to HP in your research. So there are certain advantages. So probably you can look at the trend in that methods that is being followed in recent times. So like that it can help. Now if you also see that the differences, so that is also important, that the perspective that it's not always you get all the similar trend in the findings and observation. So if there is dissimilarity, that probably we need to investigate further, that whether that this similarity is based on the locational biasness, that okay, one study is done in, say for example, some developing country and one is in some kind of developed country context, or one is just is done in a very particular user group that is being done for the, say, young population. So and the other studies for the entire population set, all age group were included in that particular study, or maybe in other study they only done that particular research for the age group above, say 60, because that is something, even taking the example of the COVID-19 impact. So there are certain advisory that okay, for the travel restriction, so it is for at least the prime focus was on that particular people having higher age group of above 60 or above 50, or maybe the people having with certain kind of other diseases or comorbidity, etc. So like that you will get a very clear idea. After thorough review of a paper, you just summarize, you just make a crisp tabular form, and then just try to compare the results. So that will give you a direction in terms of fine tuning your objective, in terms of helping you out for selecting the right method for your data collection. And also, later stage when you are reporting your own findings, you can always compare that okay, even if in my case I found that okay, this is very similar to the case which is being reported, and it is similar because it is having the similar cultural thing. Suppose some paper they have done it for the elderly population, I am also doing it, so it is matching, but it is not similar to the paper where they talked about the young people or the college school going children, or the college going student. So like that, in this case we can report it. In addition to answering the research questions, the tabulated information can also inform us what is known and what remains to be known. So in this particular case also it is going to give you the gap, because if you can identify, even you make a column that okay, all these papers what they are talking about, their limitation. So can you take up that as your scope, because maybe that particular phase that things has not been done, or maybe it is something that the researchers stop their research on that particular stage, and then want to explore further. So like that, each research where it ends will start a new avenue or new perspective to do the further research. So you can also get it from this particular tabular form. The objective observations from the data, their interpretation and scope of further research need to be synthesized in this as well. Like as I already mentioned, it is not only about the methods or maybe the objective, even the findings that can also tell you something, that okay, so this is something showing the trend that okay, there is some sort of increase in, say, online shopping activity post COVID, or there is some kind of enhanced use of digital platform for such kind of education. Even now if you consider today's lecture deliberation, so definitely you are sitting in different parts of the country, different region, and then I am just delivering this lecture from one particular part. It is possible because of this digital media and all these facilities. So like that, definitely this is something like probably was not that common, maybe say 15 years ago, or maybe when the computer were only used for certain activity, and probably it was very costly item for a common people to procure. But nowadays if you have a basic minimum smartphone, you can also get into those kind of videos, lecture, etc. So all such kind of case, you can understand that what is required further through this. The process followed for SLR needs to be elaborated in the report for transparency and replicability. So, in this case, you also need to mention it. So, while you are reporting it, especially for the review paper, that okay, you say that in this paper altogether 80 papers are reviewed, and the reporting of those 80 papers are included in different section. How you come to that 80 papers? Is it something that you missed out something? So, for avoiding such kind of conflict, or to make your paper much more attractive to the reviewer, so that you show the transparency that okay, I started with this many papers, but because of this reason, inclusion and exclusion, so I boil down to this particular 80 papers for further reading. So that way this will be very much useful to you can say, to avoid such kind of ambiguity and confusion. But again there is a challenge that okay, so today you just start your this process of Prisma, and then you identify for last 10 years, but this last 10 years is as on date. Tomorrow if you do the same process, probably today whatever paper will published, tomorrow that will be added. So we also need to specify the time frame very explicitly. In this case, definitely there should not be any ambiguity. So in your write up there should be mentioned that from which date to which date. Now definitely if that paper today you do the search, and then after 2 years you are going and you are going to publish it, or you are thinking that after 2 years I'll write the review paper, probably that time the data reliability, or maybe the whatever the document that you have reported, that will be little outdated. So probably it is very much required for a researcher to timely communicate their research. So if you are writing a research paper, especially the review paper, once it is done, try to communicate it. Definitely it will depend on the journal of the acceptance, maybe it will take some time, and time to time whenever you get a chance, you just improve it. Now coming to the summary of this, so in this case we understood the importance of systematic literature review, and also we discussed about a head to head comparison on the traditional review and systematic review. So I am not neglecting the essence of traditional review. So sometimes for something you can also go for it, but systematic literature review will give more confidence to researcher like us, so that you can rely on the findings that is already being there, the method that is being in trained, so that you can also think on that direction. So all such information is giving. We discussed about Prisma also, where from how you go for different search, inclusion, removal, retrieval of important documents, and finally boil down to the papers which will be required for the SLR. Then the data extraction, what are the informations that we extract from in a tabular form in terms of methodology, methods, results, findings, further research need, etc., and then reporting of the same, and then definitely the time frame. So the catch is that whenever you do the literature review, it is with some kind of time boundary that you need to mention without fail, because that is going to give you that the limitation of your literature review part, that if it is a review of the paper till 2023 end of December, so then maybe like last 10 years that you are going to review. So if new papers will be added after that, probably you are not responsible as of now. Definitely that whatever the statement or whatever the conclusion that we are bringing out of the literature, that is based on this. Now if you want to publish your review after certain time gap, it is better to again look at the pertinent literature and include them, so that the applicability of the paper, the timeliness of your paper will be enhanced. So with that we conclude here. These are few reading reference that I keep on showing you in my previous lectures also. You can go through that. So with that now we will move to the Last part of the literature review, that is lecture number 14 on meta analysis. So, we will be discussing more on how to do the meta analysis, how quantitatively statistically we can analyze to give a nice findings of the existing literature. So, with that I thank you again for joining the course. Hope the content is helping you out in your process, and if you have any questions, write me in the forum, I will get back to you. So, with that, thank you once again, and we will be meeting with our next lecture on meta analysis. Bye.